Google just launched the Buy For Me button. AI agents are about to place orders on behalf of your customers on your e-commerce website, and everyone's talking about agentic AI. What's it actually look like when someone's running it? So today, I'm going to show you. This is the system that actually runs pieces my agency, my e-commerce operations, and my life. Before we dive into that, though, I want to talk a little bit about this agentic AI shift. So Google's Buy For Me button and their whole approach is that AI agents are going to be placing orders directly for your customers, creating a lot of hype. People are talking about how AI is going to transform e-commerce. I've probably even said that on some previous episodes of Commerce Today. But the reality is most of you merchants out there have no idea what this means for your specific store. So I've been building AI operations for a few years now, and I want to show you a little bit of what works versus the noise. And want to call out AI agents and agentic AI isn't about chatbots. There is a chat layer in some of them, but what it's really about, the goal is AI that does things and does a lot more than you think it probably could in this day and age. It can place orders, it can monitor inventory, it can catch anomalies, schedule content, respond to your customers. So I want to show you a little bit of how I've been using Agentic AI and really how this came about. So there's a project that we talked about in the last episode of Commerce Today called OpenClaw. This is an open source agentic AI system. A single developer launched this just a couple of months ago, put it out on GitHub. It started gaining a little bit of traction. Then a few weeks ago, it gained a lot of traction. And I mentioned that it reminded me of the early days of Magento and Magento open source and kind of the whole history, which I won't get into now, but the whole history of how Magento grew, was acquired by eBay, was spun off, was purchased by Adobe. I saw this happening with OpenClaw, but I saw it happening instead of over years and months. I had the timescale wrong. I think I meant weeks, because since we last talked, OpenClaw has been acquired by OpenAI in what is rumored to potentially be a billion-dollar transaction. So they acquired a piece of software, open source software, that has only existed for a few months because of just how fast they saw it changing agentic AI capabilities. OpenClaw can run your computer, it can run websites, it can do really anything that you can do sitting in front of a computer. And that's got, I think, OpenAI both excited and scared. It was a bidding war, apparently, between them, Anthropic, the creators of Claude, Meta, and a few other names I heard tossed around. So I actually want to show you, I've been using OpenClaw, like I said, for a while now, and I have some colleagues and friends that also have tried it out, and they've all come back to me and said, hey, it's not working very well. Like, it forgets things. It doesn't really, sometimes it doesn't even know what day it is. I'm having a hard time getting it to operate the way I want. And they even told me, they said, hey, it seems like OpenClaw works well for you, but it's just not working for us. Help. What's wrong? What's different? And so I decided, in addition to telling you a bit about what OpenClaw can do and what agentic AI can do, because these principles can be applied to really any agentic AI you want to use in your e-commerce business, I actually want to show you some of my files. So there are lots of videos out there of how to set up OpenClaw, how to install memory into it, things like that. But no one's really digging in and sharing exactly what they have taught and trained their agentic AI on so that it's the most helpful. So I'm going to walk y'all through that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how you can apply this to your e-commerce business. So I'm going to pause for just a second and fire up the screen share. All right, first, a couple of quick disclaimers. These are my real files. They are constantly changing, so this is a snapshot in time. Also, I did anonymize and tweak a few things just so that I'm not giving away client confidential information or anything like that. Also, OpenClaw can modify itself. Any good evolving agentic AI should be able to do that. So some of the things I show you, your OpenClaw may not do this yet, and you can always just ask it and say, hey, when you start up, are you running a webhook to check the boot.md file? And that file is actually where we're going to start. So this is a file that OpenClaw reads every single time a new instance is created. Basically, if it restarts, when it starts up for the first time, that sort of thing. And really, we're just telling the agent some basics of, we really want you to detect drift if something's wrong in your setup. We want you to be able to report any problems. This file right now says do not do repairs automatically. Sometimes I actually change that and have it do the repairs automatically. But the idea is if it hits an error while starting up, it will actually just talk to you and say, hey, I found this problem. Is it okay if I fix it? Here's how I'm going to fix it. And then this is very specific to my setup. I haven't actually go through and check, okay, Is the gateway running? Is it listening? Also, I use LM Studio to host some local models. So it checks to make sure that's up and running. It makes sure that the QMD command is present. If you haven't installed QMD yet, I'd say it's the best software that's come out of Shopify. So the CEO of Shopify has open sourced a markdown-based memory system that is really helpful for OpenClaw. So it's called QMD. Go check that out. But also looks, just make sure some of your files aren't getting too big, a few other things like that. So that is really helpful to have to make sure that you're starting from a clean, healthy agent the moment it starts up. So after boot, something that's interesting, I like the naming of this. The creator of OpenClaw has it check a file called SOUL.md. And this tells the LLM that as an agent, this is the soul of who you are. So this should be personalized to you and to your business and to your needs. So this file is where things really should start to diverge from the basic setup and from anything from me. I have actually borrowed a few lines in here from different things I've seen from other experts using OpenClaw, but start out with some core truths. This was actually a value setting process that I did with the LLM, which was super interesting. And so basically, one of the very first things that gets sent to the LLM as part of spinning up a new agent is something that says, be genuinely helpful, not performatively helpful, have opinions, humor is allowed. Did add never forced there because at first that got a little over the top. Push back directly, be resourceful. So one of the biggest things I have seen across a number of different people using OpenClaw is you have to tell the agents to be resourceful. Otherwise, it's going to just come back and say, I don't know what to do. What do you think I should do? So you definitely want it to be resourceful. However, you also want to encourage it to honor your trust and earn your trust. And then I set some boundaries of private things stay private. When in doubt, ask before acting externally, etc. Also, at the end of the soul file, I kind of point to some other files. So the soul file that it's reading right then, the principles file, and the agents file. And I think the principles file may be a creation of my OpenClaw instance. At this point, it's hard to tell what was added by the OpenClaw core, what I picked up on Twitter, and what has evolved out of my system. But the principles file is actually super helpful, super useful. So I'm going to show you that next. So the principles file, how you decide, some operating rules. And each time we have a problem or something doesn't work well, I will ask my agent, how can we do this better? How can we make sure you do this better next time? And that has actually led to some of these principles. Tell the truth, be reliable, protect trust. A lot of those are pretty obvious. Evidence before claims. So a common complaint I see is my agent says it did something, but it completely made that up. It didn't actually do the task. One of the principles, and you'll see this throughout really how I use OpenClaw, is give evidence, give receipts, show what files you changed, show what commands you ran, show the output, give links, give timestamps. You're basically forcing the agent to actually do the work and document that it did the work. Some of this also, an interesting thing you can do, if you have done personality tests, if you've done things like the Enneagram, StrengthsFinder, or if you're neurodiverse, any of that information, feed that into OpenClaw and say, hey, OpenClaw, based on this, how can you help me better? And so one of the things that came out of that is my OpenClaw really likes to give me 5 to 10 minute chunks. It was giving me, here's 17 paragraphs of what you can do for the next 2 weeks to implement this project. And immediately I'm like, nope, it's never going to happen. So it now gives me 5 to 10 minute chunks to work in so that if my attention drifts or if boredom sets in, I have a new chunk coming soon. Also, some things that I see people get frustrated with these AIs is they lose context. They between sessions, between compaction runs, or they just lose things because the system crashes. OpenClaw has updates pretty much every day. Those have become more stable, but they still require restarting the OpenClaw process. So it's going to get restarted fairly often. So you want OpenClaw to actually find ways to preserve its context and to make sure it doesn't lose work to a crash. So I have a lot where it will intentionally write what it's about to do to a file. And then when it finishes, it updates that file. It keeps a file of all the currently running tasks, those sort of things. That way, if it crashes, when it starts back up, it can reread those and remember where it was. I also have a system called Conductor. Everyone, it seems like one of the first things they build, especially if they're a developer, when they're using something like OpenClaw, is an orchestration layer, a project management system, mission control, some people call it. Me and my OpenClaw, we named ours Claw Conductor. It's basically just a place where it can maintain the state of projects and assign agents to work on projects. I did create some rules there saying, hey, please projects, but check to see if an existing project already fits. Otherwise, it was spinning up 20 different projects for basically the same thing. Another important thing to include in these files and in how you use Agentic AI is you have to tell it, learn from your mistakes. Everything you learn from your mistakes, everything that happens, you should learn from. And so my OpenClaw, and I'll show you some of the files, actually stores corrections that I give it in a specific place. It stores lessons that it's learned in another place. And if there's unresolved issues, it's tracking those as well. It's also important, and this is another thing that I picked up on Twitter from an OpenClaw power user. It's very important to tell it to use agents and to specialize those agents. There's new sub-agent features in OpenClaw, but it won't use them unless you really encourage it. And these autonomy layers. So basically making sure that if it's something super basic, if it's reading a file in its workspace, it doesn't need to go ask you for permission for that. You will get frustrated. It will take forever. But if it's thinking about, say, making a $500 purchase using your credit card that you saved in your browser that it has access to, it absolutely needs to get explicit permission. Like, it doesn't need to even try to think about doing that on its own. It only needs to do that if you have asked it to do that. Also, as part of all this, I have asked it to keep a running change log of anything it changes. For instance, I showed you the SOUL file. It actually updates the SOUL file. It updates this principles file itself. So I want to have a change log so I know when it's updating itself and what's changing. Mentioned a lot of things around crash protection and recovery. The 2 ledgers, 2 jobs, that's basically to remind it that Claw Conductor holds the project history and that we have an active tasks markdown file of what's happening right now, of tasks it's running right now. This one, actually verify executable assets exist before invoking. That's a principle that it added because it was getting frustrated at the amount of times that subagents would go and run a command that didn't even exist. Like, they would run a file or a script and it didn't exist. It would throw an error and have to try again. So OpenClaw actually added that principle here. And then the last of these kind of startup files is the AGENTS.md file. You should be familiar with this if you've used any sort of agentic coding, but this is basically a standard that helps an agent get up to speed on how to operate in a given project. This is a roadmap of all the different files and what it needs to do. But again, a few things I've added here that are, I think, super useful and necessary for using agentic AI is this universal verification contract. It actually named it a contract. It's a little over the top sometimes and stuff like that. But basically, before any agent claims that work is complete, it must follow this detailed markdown file where it will actually say, here are the deliverables. Here's the exact artifacts and paths and how you can prove that the work was done. Here's how you can verify it. Here's what you asked me to do versus what I actually did. And agents are not allowed to say they're done until they complete one of these files and pass it back. And so that is how you avoid it drifting or just completely hallucinating that it did the project. I know we're all tired of AI writing, and so I put a filter in. There's a skill called Humanizer that tries to make AI output more human. And I have put that into the agents.md file here so that even as I'm chatting with the agentic AI, I'm not getting that obviously AI written junk. Also saw this via Twitter earlier today. I have a skill usage transparency system. So anytime it is using a skill, it actually outputs to our conversation that it's using that skill. Once it's done with the skill, it deletes it, but that lets me see, okay, the task is in progress. This is what it's working on. And just a lot of other good basics here. And this has really, some of this came from OpenClaw Core. A lot of this came from my agent specifically updating itself. So even understanding when to use heartbeats versus cron. Now, crash recovery, this whole section, again, is super important. Basically, every session start, That includes restarts, new cron runs, subagents. Read the active task file first. If there is anything incomplete that is basically broken, check on it, resume it if needed, and then also keep that file up to date. That will cut down on a lot of your frustration with OpenClaw. Also, learning loop. So when a command fails, a user corrects you, or you notice repeat friction, you must add a regression entry. And if it's a durable lesson, update this agents file or the principles file. Also store a concise durable memory. That's using my OpenClaw Ingram plugin that I use for managing memory. That is open source. I highly recommend you go check it out. It is on my GitHub. You just search GitHub for OpenClaw-Ingram. That's ENGRAM. You'll find it, and it really helps improve OpenClaw's memory. One of the things it does is it actually allows the agent to store things as a correction. And I'll show you that. It actually stores all of that as a markdown file. So that is really this whole system. Let me show you very briefly where those corrections live. So all the memories are markdown files under this local folder. And there are a lot of corrections, but corrections are highly atomic. So basically each of these files is one correction I have given the agent. And yeah, there's a lot of them. Let's check on a couple of the most recent ones. So check here. So this is actually where I need to make an improvement to the Ingram plugin because there should be a little bit more context here. Although this is a general rule of readability issue is determined to be a CSS design problem, not a content problem. There was a really good one that I should have bookmarked for y'all so you don't have to see me just randomly clicking through here. Oh, here we go. So I was implementing something new using Transistor, which allows you to have private podcasts. And that was actually for the Insight Stream project. So that's where we now have for $19 a month, a daily podcast briefing that you can get about e-commerce news, everything that's happened that you need to know about that morning that you can listen to as you drink your morning coffee. So I actually went back and forth with the agent. It just wasn't getting it right. I said, nope, the only way to do this is I will create a draft episode via the API for you. You have to log into the web interface to actually mark it as published and make it available. I looked at the API documentation. I said, wait, nope, that's not true. Here's the actual API endpoint you need. I gave it that correction. It has now stored that, and through the Ingram plugin and through the use of that QMD system that I mentioned earlier, anytime it's working with the Transistor API, this little correction is going to be added into the system prompt automatically so that it doesn't make that mistake again. So that is super helpful. Highly recommend you look at using something like that. And now I will end the screen share and come back, and we will talk about how you can apply this, what OpenClaw is currently doing for me, and what this means for merchants. So I hope that was helpful, walking through those files. Hopefully there's some good concepts you can pull out of that. I will say if you're overwhelmed, especially if you haven't used Agentic AI or OpenClaw before, that's okay. I understand that it is a little overwhelming. I can help you set it up. There's a lot of people online that can help you set it up. I would just encourage you to try it out. Why do you want to try it out? So what can OpenClaw do for you? OpenClaw pulls all of my social stats, all of the data and analytics on these videos, actually. It's able to use that to give me feedback on how to improve my videos, how to improve my clips, all that stuff. Does the same thing with web analytics. So it can go through and you can even just tell it, hey, once a day, connect to my Google Analytics, find the most interesting or most concerning things and help me fix them. Or even in some cases, fix them. It can actually go through and do that for you. So a lot of the stuff that I see so many e-commerce leaders just don't have time to do falls by the wayside. It falls to, oh, someday in a perfect utopian future, I will work on this. And instead, you can have your agentic AI helping you with that. Obviously, all the little stuff, reminders, follow-ups, email triage, it's great at that. But I would say think bigger. It's really amazing how much OpenClaw can do. It actually has access to my meeting transcripts. So lots of times before I have even landed after a meeting, it has already read the transcript, sometimes even done the work, done the follow-ups, and basically has given me, hey, here's what you need to do next. And so I'm able to just keep moving and keep projects moving forward so much faster. So What about for merchants? What does this mean specifically for you working directly in e-commerce? First of all, you don't have to build this yourself. I would definitely encourage you look at Agentic AI just like you look at your e-commerce platform. Sure, you as e-commerce director could probably go out there and install Shopify, configure it, do all the work, build a custom theme, source all the products, do it all yourself, but that's not the smart way to do it. You use agencies, you use consultants, you use team members for a reason. You don't want to try to do it all yourself. Agentic AI is moving so fast. This is an area where hiring an agency or a consultant can give great dividends because they can get you up and running with the latest and greatest without you having to go try to consume the fire hose that is everything that is changing literally every day, sometimes every hour with Agentic AI right now. Also, even if you decide this isn't for you, you're not going to use this right now, you're not interested in AI, either for yourself, your own work, or the web experience for your customers, you need to still know what's possible. You might have made a big decision, no AI, that's fine, but you need to realize your competitors are doing this. And so you need to start adapting for, okay, your competitors may be able to change their content, produce new content effectively immediately in response to a new trend, in response to something in their analytics, or even in response to something that you're doing. A lot of people have AI monitoring their competitors and the moves their competitors are making. So really three things to ask your agency. So if you're working with an e-commerce agency already, ask them, do you use AI in your own operations? How are you delivering faster, cheaper, or better than 2 years ago? And what would AI augmented execution look like for my store? They should hopefully have some really solid answers for that and hopefully a little bit of transparency because honestly, every agency I talk to, they are still figuring this out, but that's good. You honestly want a response of, we don't know, we're still figuring it out. That's a lot better than them saying, oh no, we're not messing with that AI stuff, or saying, oh yes, everything is figured out. It works perfectly. We never have to change it. That's not true. That's not the way these AI agents are working or how they're evolving. So I'm not saying that you need OpenClaw. I'm saying that you want an agency that is this sophisticated, that is using something like OpenClaw, because an agency that's AI augmented is going to outpace one that isn't, and is probably going to do so at a lower cost to you and definitely at a much higher efficiency. If you want to see what AI operations could look like for your store, Creativity's AI operations service does exactly this. We can do a quick audit for you, or we can actually build it out for you and you can just benefit from the results. So check out our new and improved creativity.com for information about that. And I hope to see you again soon for another episode of Commerce Today.